Detective Mark Reynolds was a man who carried his badge like a shield. For him, the badge was more than just a piece of metal. It was a symbol of power, respect, and authority. He had worked in the police force for many years and had earned a reputation as someone who got results no matter what. Reynolds believed that being a detective gave him a kind of protection, a sense that he was untouchable. To him, his position meant he could bend the rules, push people around, and still come out clean. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a belief rooted in experience and a network of connections he had built over time. Mark was the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone notice him. His uniform was always neat, his gun holstered but visible, and his eyes sharp and calculating. He had a way of speaking that demanded attention. People around him often felt uneasy but also admired his confidence. Inside the police department, many officers respected him because he had solved some tough cases. Outside the department, though, his attitude sometimes rubbed people the wrong way. Some called him too harsh or even unfair, but Reynolds didn't care much about what others thought. His focus was on results. One of the reasons Reynolds felt so powerful was because of how well connected he was. Over the years, he had made friends with important people in the department, City Hall, and even the local courts. He knew who to call if he needed help, and those contacts often shielded him from trouble. If there were complaints about his behavior, they rarely went anywhere. People just assumed that since he was a police officer, he must be doing his job right. This created a dangerous environment where Reynolds felt free to act however he wanted. Then came the case of Emily Carter. She was a local businesswoman, not someone who would usually be involved in anything serious with the police. But something about this case caught Reynolds' attention. The complaint against Emily was about fraud, an accusation that could ruin a person's reputation and career. For Reynolds, it seemed like an open and shut case. He thought it would be just another routine investigation where he could use his usual methods: pressure, threats, and a little manipulation. He was confident he could get a conviction without much trouble. Emily Carter, however, was different from the usual suspects Reynolds dealt with. She was not the kind of woman who would back down easily. She had built her business from the ground up, working long hours and making many sacrifices. When Reynolds came knocking, accusing her of fraud, Emily was shocked. She knew she was innocent, but the way Reynolds approached her was aggressive and intimidating. He acted as if she had already been found guilty, and his tone made it clear he expected her to confess. Reynolds' overconfidence blinded him to Emily's strength. He underestimated her determination and resilience. He treated her as if she was just another criminal to be broken, not realizing that Emily had a fierce spirit. She refused to be scared by his tactics. Instead, she began to gather her own evidence and reach out to people who could support her cause. She knew that if she wanted to fight back, she would have to be smart and persistent. As the investigation progressed, Reynolds continued to act as if the case was already won. He ignored signs that Emily might not be guilty and dismissed any information that didn't fit his story. He believed his badge made him immune to mistakes or consequences. But behind the scenes, Emily was quietly building a case to prove him wrong. This clash between Reynolds' arrogance and Emily's determination set the stage for a dramatic battle. The detective's confidence, which once seemed unshakable, was about to face a challenge it hadn't anticipated. Emily's refusal to be intimidated began to expose cracks in Reynolds' approach, hinting that the badge might not be as powerful as he thought. In the beginning, Reynolds was the man in control. He believed the law was on his side and that his authority would crush anyone who stood against him. But Emily's story was just starting to unfold, and it was clear that this case would test more than just his skills as a detective. It would test the limits of his belief in his own untouchability. Emily Carter was not an ordinary woman. She was someone who had faced many hardships in her life, but never let them stop her. From a young age, she had learned the value of hard work and determination. Growing up in a small town, Emily watched her parents struggle to make ends meet. She promised herself that she would one day create a better life, not just for herself, but for those around her. She dreamed of owning her own business, a place where she could be independent and successful. Years of effort and sacrifice had gone into building her small but thriving company. Emily had started with very little, just a small loan, a few loyal customers, and a lot of passion. She worked day and night, often putting her personal life on hold to ensure her business succeeded. The community admired her for her dedication and honesty. Emily's reputation was spotless, and her name was well respected among those who knew her. She was proud of everything she had accomplished through sheer hard work. So when the news came that she was being accused of fraud, Emily's world was turned upside down. It felt like a nightmare. Fraud was a serious charge, one that could destroy everything she had worked for. At first, she couldn't believe it. How could someone like Detective Mark Reynolds accuse her of something so terrible? She knew she was innocent, but facing an accusation from a man with a badge and power was terrifying. She understood that the police and the courts were not easy to fight against. Emily felt a mix of fear, anger, and confusion. She knew the law could be harsh and unforgiving, especially when someone like Reynolds was involved. The detective had a reputation for being tough and relentless. He didn't seem to care about the truth, just about winning cases. His aggressive style of policing was well known, and many people avoided crossing him. Emily realized she was stepping into a dangerous fight, but she refused to give up. Instead of backing down, Emily decided to stand her ground. She knew that if she wanted to protect herself and her business, she had to be strong and smart. She began to gather documents, receipts, and any records that could prove her innocence. Every day, she spent hours going over financial statements and business transactions to find proof that she had done nothing wrong. Emily was determined to fight the charges with everything she had. Her fight was not just about clearing her name, it was about defending her dignity and the truth. Emily had seen too many people lose everything because of false accusations or corrupt officials. She wanted to be a voice for others who had been wrongly targeted. This case became more than just a personal battle. It became a mission for justice. Emily also reached out for help. She contacted lawyers who specialized in fighting wrongful accusations and corruption. She found people who believed in her and were willing to support her cause. These allies gave her hope and strength. Together, they started building a defense that would challenge Reynolds' claims and expose the truth. Despite the stress and pressure, Emily never lost her composure. She remained calm and focused, even when Reynolds tried to intimidate her. He used harsh words, aggressive questioning, and subtle threats, hoping to make her crack. But Emily's spirit was unbreakable. She refused to be scared or silenced. Instead, she used his aggression as fuel to fight harder. Emily's courage inspired many around her. Friends, family, and members of the community rallied to her side. They knew that what she was facing was unfair and unjust. Their support gave Emily even more confidence to keep going. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who believed in truth and fairness. As the case moved forward, Emily's preparation began to pay off. The evidence she collected started to reveal inconsistencies in the accusations against her. Documents showed that her business transactions were legitimate and transparent. Witnesses came forward to testify on her behalf, confirming her honesty and integrity. Slowly but surely, the narrative that Reynolds had painted was starting to unravel. Emily's battle was not easy. There were moments of doubt and fear, times when the pressure seemed overwhelming. But each time she thought about giving up, she reminded herself why she had started this fight. Her badge-wielding opponent thought she was an easy target, but she was anything but. Emily was a woman with nothing to lose and everything to gain. Her story was not just about a court case, it was about standing up to power and refusing to be a victim. Emily's determination showed that courage and truth could challenge even the strongest forces. She proved that one person's voice, when backed by conviction and evidence, could make a difference. In the end, Emily's fight became a symbol of hope. It showed that justice was possible, even against those who seemed untouchable. Her story inspired others to believe in their own strength and to never back down, no matter how difficult the battle might seem. Emily Carter was not just a businesswoman, accused of fraud. She was a warrior standing tall in the face of injustice. When the courtroom doors closed behind Detective Mark Reynolds and Emily Carter, the battle between them shifted from whispers and papers to a public, high-stakes confrontation. The small courtroom was packed with people curious about the case. The accused businesswoman and the confident detective, whose badge had always seemed like a shield against consequences. Now, everything was on the line. Emily sat calmly, her hands folded on her lap, as she listened to the judge's opening statements. She knew this was more than just a trial. It was a fight for her future, her reputation, and her dignity. She had prepared for this moment for months, working closely with her lawyer, gathering documents, lining up witnesses, and rehearsing every detail. She knew the power Reynolds held, but she also knew she had the truth on her side. Mark Reynolds, on the other hand, walked into the courtroom with his usual air of confidence. He believed the trial was a formality, that the judge and jury would side with him simply because he was the detective. Reynolds thought his years on the force and his record of arrests would carry the day. He wore his badge like armor and underestimated Emily's ability to fight back. The trial began with the prosecution presenting its case. Reynolds took the stand first. He recounted the investigation from his perspective, describing how he uncovered evidence of fraud in Emily's business. His tone was firm and authoritative, designed to convince the jury that he was right. He spoke about the documents he had found and the inconsistencies he claimed existed in Emily's records. To many in the courtroom, Reynolds seemed convincing. But Emily's defense team was ready. They carefully questioned Reynolds, highlighting gaps in his story and pointing out contradictions. Under the cross-examination, cracks began to appear in the detective's narrative. The defense lawyer asked about procedures Reynolds had supposedly followed, and Reynolds struggled to explain some of his actions. The questions made it clear that his investigation had not been as thorough or fair as he had claimed. More importantly, the defense introduced new evidence, documents, and expert testimonies that supported Emily's innocence. These pieces of evidence showed that her business records were accurate and legitimate. Financial experts explained how the transactions in question were standard and legal. Witnesses testified to Emily's character and her honesty in business dealings. As the trial continued, the atmosphere in the courtroom began to shift. People who had initially assumed Reynolds was correct started to doubt his claims. The once confident detective looked more defensive and uneasy. His usual control over the courtroom was slipping away. The defense was exposing not just Emily's innocence, but also flaws in Reynolds' investigation. One of the most dramatic moments came when a former colleague of Reynolds took the stand. This witness revealed that Reynolds had sometimes used aggressive tactics and even bent rules to close cases quickly. This testimony was a turning point, raising questions about Reynolds' credibility and integrity. It suggested that the detective might have been more interested in winning than in uncovering the truth. Emily watched quietly as the evidence mounted in her favor. She knew the battle was far from over, but each piece of proof brought her closer to justice. Her calm demeanor and unwavering resolve impressed many in the courtroom. She wasn't just fighting a legal battle. She was standing up for honesty and fairness against someone who had abused his power. The jury listened carefully to all the testimony and evidence. They had to decide whether Emily was guilty of fraud or whether Reynolds' accusations were unfounded. The courtroom buzzed with tension as everyone waited for the verdict. This was not just about a businesswoman and a detective. It was about trust in the system and the fight against corruption. Throughout the trial, Emily's courage and preparation had turned the tide. The courtroom battle revealed that badges and authority were not enough to guarantee truth or justice. The power of evidence, honesty, and determination could challenge even the most confident and untouchable figures. When the judge finally instructed the jury to deliberate, the outcome was uncertain. But the story of Emily Carter and Detective Mark Reynolds had already made an impact. It showed that the courtroom could be a place where truth mattered, where even those with power could be held accountable. In the end, the trial was more than just a fight between two people. It was a reminder that justice is complex and fragile, requiring vigilance and courage from those who seek it. Emily's courtroom battle was a testament to the strength of a determined individual standing up against the odds and proving that no one is above the law. Detective Mark Reynolds had always believed that his badge gave him the power to act without fear of consequences. For years, that belief had served him well. He had become known as a tough officer who got results quickly, often using aggressive tactics that many quietly disapproved of, but few dared to challenge. His connections within the police department and beyond made him seem untouchable. But all of that was about to change. The courtroom had already begun to reveal cracks in Reynolds's carefully constructed image. As the evidence against him grew, so did the questions about his integrity and the methods he had used during the investigation. The trial was no longer just about whether Emily Carter was guilty or innocent. It was becoming a reckoning for Reynolds himself. It started with the evidence. Emily's defense team had presented clear proof that contradicted Reynolds' reports. Financial documents, expert testimonies, and witness statements painted a picture very different from the one Reynolds had described. The more the defense exposed inconsistencies, the harder it became for Reynolds to maintain his confident posture. People began to realize that his investigation might have been rushed, biased, or even deliberately manipulated. One of the most damaging moments came when the defense uncovered evidence suggesting that Reynolds had altered some reports. This wasn't just a small mistake or oversight. It was a serious breach of trust and professionalism. If proven true, it meant Reynolds had broken the law himself by falsifying documents. This revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom and beyond. The judge, who had until then appeared neutral and reserved, became more engaged in the proceedings. It was clear that the court was not willing to overlook misconduct, no matter the status of the person involved. Reynolds was no longer just a detective on trial. He was a symbol of a system that was being forced to confront its flaws. Witnesses who had once been silent started coming forward. Some colleagues spoke about Reynolds' aggressive behavior, his tendency to intimidate suspects, and his disregard for proper procedure. Others shared stories of pressure to close cases quickly, even if it meant bending rules. This testimony painted a picture of a detective who cared more about winning than justice. Reynolds's defense team struggled to respond to these accusations. The detective himself became defensive and less composed. His earlier confidence gave way to frustration and anger. For the first time in a long while, Reynolds felt vulnerable. The badge that had once protected him now seemed like a heavy burden. Public opinion also began to shift. News of the trial and the revelations about Reynolds' misconduct spread through the community. People who had trusted him started to question their beliefs. The idea that someone with so much power could abuse it was unsettling. For many, the trial was a moment of awakening, a reminder that no one is above the law. Emily Carter's victory in the courtroom was a pivotal moment, but it was just the beginning of a larger story. The proof of Reynolds's misconduct triggered a formal investigation into his actions. The police department, under public pressure, had to take the matter seriously. Reynolds faced internal disciplinary hearings and possible criminal charges. The fall of Reynolds sent a message throughout the department and the city. Abuse of power would not be tolerated. It also gave hope to others who had faced injustice or corruption. Emily's courage had not only saved herself, but had helped bring about a demand for accountability. Reynolds' story became a cautionary tale. It showed how confidence and power, when unchecked, could lead to downfall. It reminded people that badges and titles do not grant immunity from the law. The justice system, flawed as it might be, still had the capacity to hold even the most powerful accountable. For Emily, the trial and its aftermath were exhausting but ultimately rewarding. She had faced a man who thought he was untouchable and shown the world that courage, truth, and persistence could bring justice. Her victory was not just personal. It was a victory for all those who believe in fairness and accountability. In the end, the fall of Detective Mark Reynolds marked a turning point. It forced the police department to examine its practices and reinforced the principle that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the law. The story was a powerful reminder that justice is not guaranteed by a badge but earned through honesty and integrity. After the dramatic courtroom battle and the fall of Detective Mark Reynolds, Emily Carter's life entered a new chapter. What had started as a personal fight for her innocence grew into something much larger, a movement for justice, accountability, and change. The verdict not only cleared her name, but also sparked a ripple effect that reached far beyond the walls of the courtroom. Emily knew that her victory was significant, but she also understood it was just the beginning. The legal system had spoken, but real change required more than just one case won. She decided to use her experience to raise awareness about abuse of power and the need for reform in law enforcement. She wanted to ensure that what happened to her wouldn't happen to others. Her story caught the attention of journalists, activists, and community leaders. Interviews, articles, and public talks followed, giving Emily a platform to share her journey. She spoke honestly about the fear and injustice she faced, and the strength it took to stand up against a system that often protected the powerful. Her words inspired many people who had also felt powerless or wronged. Emily also worked with advocacy groups focused on police accountability. Together, they pushed for stronger oversight and transparency within the police department. They called for better training, fairer investigations, and clear consequences for officers who abused their authority. Emily's experience became a case study in why these reforms were necessary. The police department could no longer ignore the issue. Public pressure grew, and officials were forced to act. Reynolds faced formal charges not just for his misconduct, in Emily's case, but for other allegations that surfaced during the investigation. The department launched an internal review, and policies were updated to prevent similar abuses in the future. For Reynolds, the reckoning was harsh. He faced suspension, loss of rank, and eventually criminal prosecution. The badge that once made him feel untouchable now represented a career lost and a reputation destroyed. His downfall was a clear example of how power, when misused, can lead to ruin. Emily's fight had a lasting impact on the community as well. People began to demand more accountability from law enforcement officers and more protection for ordinary citizens. Trust, which had been damaged by Reynolds' actions, slowly began to rebuild. The case encouraged dialogue between the police and the public about rights, responsibilities, and respect. Despite the challenges she faced, Emily never wavered in her commitment to justice. She continued to grow her business, now with even greater respect from the community. Her story became a symbol of resilience and hope, showing that even in the face of great adversity, truth and determination can prevail. Emily also became a mentor for others who were fighting similar battles. She offered support, advice, and encouragement to people facing wrongful accusations or corruption. Her experience gave her a unique voice and credibility that made her a powerful advocate. The ripple effects of Emily's case went beyond the city. Other communities learned from the story, and some began their own investigations into police misconduct. The movement for reform gained momentum, showing that change was possible when people stood together. At its core, Emily's story was about more than a legal victory. It was about holding those in power accountable and protecting the rights of individuals. It was a reminder that no one should live in fear of those who are supposed to serve and protect them. The badge does not give anyone the right to abuse or harm. Emily's journey was a testament to courage. The courage to speak out, to fight back, and to demand fairness. It showed that even when the system seems stacked against you, it is possible to make a difference. Her story was a beacon for justice, shining light into the shadows where abuse and corruption hide. In the end, justice was not just a word for Emily, it was a lived reality. Her victory was a victory for truth and integrity, for fairness and accountability. It was a reminder that the fight for justice is ongoing but worth every effort. The story of Emily Carter and Detective Mark Reynolds will be remembered not just as a courtroom drama, but as a powerful example of how ordinary people can challenge extraordinary odds and bring about real change. It reminds us all that justice belongs to everyone, and that no one is above the law.